In the scientific literature, in the independent scientific literature, there is only one study that looks at a lifetime exposure to a formulated pesticide at the actual levels we are exposed to. In this case, it's parts per billion. It's about 1,000 times less than is permitted as safe by our regulatory authorities. And what it showed is that the exposed animals, all of them, all the female animals developed mammary tumours, except for one that had an ovarian tumour. They all had various degrees of kidney damage and liver damage. And I think what's really important about this study is that the particular rat they used is used by toxicologists because it's a very good model for human exposure. That's why it's used. This actual study was actually based on an earlier study by Monsanto, the maker of Roundup. And in this case, they did a 90-day study, but Professor Seralini looked at the 90-day study, and while Monsanto said there was no problems with it, he could see major problems and wrote up a paper showing that Monsanto had not analysed the data, and in 90 days could see problems. But he went and replicated the study, but instead of doing it for 90 days, decided to do it for 2 years, which is the lifetime of a rat. And after the 90-day period, that's when they started to see all the problems. The difference between the controls, and the controls are the ones who did not get the glyphosate, and the animals that did get the glyphosate. In this study also, they looked at the GMO and the combination of the GMO and Roundup. All three caused mammary tumours and other tumours in the animals and substantial damage to various tissues of the body compared to the animals that were not controlled. And this is a really important issue here. So here we can look at the slides and see, and there they show the areas of damage to different tissues. And I think what's really important about this is, I'll say again, this is the levels that most of us here will have in our blood and urine systems, because Roundup is like the new DDT. It's everywhere. It's in water, it's in food. Nearly everybody who's tested has Roundup. And of great concern is it's in breast milk, and we know it crosses the placenta. It's affecting our babies before they're born and after they're born. This study alarmed the pesticide industry so much, and especially Monsanto. They did everything possible to denigrate it. They actually forced it to go through what's called a second peer review. And to explain peer review, this is the gold standard in science. This is where a study is written up by the researchers, and then other independent experts look at it and check it for accuracy. Then it gets published in a recognized scientific journal. Monsanto did everything possible to try and get this study taken off, so they did a second peer review, and that came up that the study is a good study, but still Monsanto played dirty tricks and got it pulled out of the journal, got it retracted. However, it went through a third peer reviewed and got published in a second journal. So this particular study has been peer reviewed 3 times, which makes it one of the most rigorous study ever published. You hear people say, oh, this study, it uses a rat that just gets cancer. Well, Monsanto used exactly the same rat in its study. Why? Because it is a very good model for cancer in humans. And the difference is between the ones that did not get the Roundup and the ones that did get the Roundup. And you compare the difference. And the ones that did get the Roundup, substantially more cancers. In fact, in the case of the female rats, all of them had tumours, all of the treated ones. So this study, for me, should have been a wake-up call. At the moment, they're trying to debunk it again by doing another set of studies on lifetime exposure to Roundup. But guess what? They're using a different rat. This is a rat we know does not get cancer. So the outcome will be there'll be no cancers. And then they will say, our studies show that Roundup is safe, it doesn't get cancers. But it is not the same study. You know, if you use a study with a rat that is proven not to get cancer, it proves nothing. You need a rat model that gets cancer in the same way as humans. And that is the warning about this study. So there we're talking about just one formulated pesticide. Out of the thousands, we have one study of lifetime exposure. But the reality is, when pesticides are approved, they don't approve just one pesticide to be used in a crop. They approve multiple pesticides. So they'll be insecticides, fungicides, herbicides. For those of you who are listening to Philip before, and he's talking about the apple orchards in the Tyrol in Italy, and they're using up to 35 pesticides. And believe me, in horticulture, in fresh fruit and vegetable production around the world, that is fairly typical. Consequently, all the research shows that most foods and most people have multiple pesticide residues. And there's no requirement for testing these combinations. There's an assumption that there's no change in toxicity between the combination of pesticides and the individual pesticides, which is a nonsense. Where we have peer-reviewed science done by independent researchers, not by the pesticide companies, by independent scientists and researchers, we know that these combinations are usually more than just being additive. You know, common sense would say if you add two chemicals together, you increase the toxicity. That's being additive. But many of them are synergistic. What synergistic means, instead of being additive, 1 and 1 equals 2, the effect is stronger. 1 and 1 equals 3, 4, 5. And we have very good papers showing that in some cases 1 and 1 can equal 100 or even 1,000 times more toxic. I think what is of great concern here is research here in the United States shows that babies are being born with up to 232 chemicals in the placental cord blood. In other words, these chemicals are crossing the placenta and affecting the unborn baby. We have no science as to what it means. But the science we do have, and I'll talk more about it, shows that this is not good news, that we do know we're doing harm to our children before they have even born.